Now, 4:02 p.m. I'm Jacob Pride, the chair of the Smithfield Township Board of Supervisors. This is a joint session between the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission to review amendments to the Economic Development Zone. If you'll join me, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm going to mute us on Zoom so we don't hear a lag. Okay, members present, myself, Supervisor Lovenheim, and Supervisor Barrett. We also have, actually, everybody here. You guys want to go do a roll call so Julia can get in the minutes? Start with you, Mitch.
Mitch Boyer. Bob Moody. Doug Scriven. Scott Amori. Chris Andrew. David Strunk. Michael Albert.
With that, we have a full quorum of both boards, so that's great. We also have our solicitor, Ron Karasak, and our engineer, Missy Kruger. She's here on behalf of Boucher and James. We have no minutes. Do we have any public comments on the agenda? This is not comment on what we're discussing. This is comment on, well, the lack thereof or items that are not included on the agenda. Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to new business, which is reviewing and discussing amendments to the Economic Development Zone. We have all been talking about this topic for a long time. Last year, we passed the Economic Development Zone, and at this point, we are considering technical and conceptual amendments to the zone. They primarily center on syntax, and then there's also broader concepts that can also be discussed. For the purposes of today's discussion, I've sent to members of the Commission and my colleagues here, the Board of Supervisors, my feeling as to how we should approach today to keep things in an orderly fashion where everybody can be heard and where we follow the ordinances and the various items in your packets, which, depending on when you printed it, is either 44 or 71 pages. But should you need additional copies, we have some here of Ordinance 236. My feeling is that the first item that we should discuss is sort of a skinny ordinance, which would be adopted later on this fall and would fix the technical errors such as the inadvertent residential prohibition on mixed-use buildings. As we talked about Planning Commission, there are blanks and references to off-site infrastructure improvement fees, and also addressing the ratio for residential to commercial depending on the type of project, and adding some definitions that need to be added based on either our previous ordinances, such as our wireless facilities ordinance, which is a result of federal law, and also just as a result of things that are coming up, things that are missing, such as a flower shop or bakery, things that are generally not controversial. I find people are usually passionately in favor of bakeries and flower shops, but that remains to be seen. We'll talk about that. And then as far as an omnibus ordinance, which would consider the broader issues, that would be things like the scenic corridor, shooting range issues potentially, and open space credits and various items like that. Does anybody on either board have any questions?
Well, I think on the one we're doing today, we're talking about, according to this, indoor shooting ranges, right? We're just talking about a later date to talk about other shooting ranges other than indoor, correct?
Well, right, but the draft, and according to Ron, at some point there has to be some version of a shooting range that's involved. Presently, it's only in the industrial zone. That's something we will get to.
So today we are going to talk about indoor shooting ranges.
All of these issues, yeah. Julie, did you have?
Yeah, just an announcement for the public. If you've never attended a meeting before, we will need your first and last name, so I know who you are and what you're saying. So as you comment, just please make sure that you say what your name is, and if I ask you to spell it, please don't be angry with me. My job here is to take the minutes to make sure that we keep an accurate record of what's going on right now.
Yeah.
Maybe for the benefit of the public, highlight in more layman terms, what we're reviewing and what we're not reviewing.
Right.
Because I'm not sure it's entirely clear
Yeah.
that the economic development zone already exists.
Right.
This is an amendment to make a bunch of
Right.
things, and then there are some bigger issues related to that.
Right.
Maybe the map is also really do you want to be talking about maps today, just the 6 parcels on Independence,
Right.
right?
Right.
Yes.
So that, just so everyone understands, I think
Right, yeah, Commissioner Albert makes a very good point. I know some people here may have, feelings about certain projects. We are not here to primarily discuss individual projects so much as we are here to be talking about, the zoning rules that apply to any project throughout the township. The Economic Development Zone, as I said earlier, was passed last year, which encourages, mixed-use projects with, residential to commercial mixes, retail and commercial, office space, medical uses, generally things that will improve working and living in our township while also preserving the character of the township with aesthetic standards. An example might be, instead of having a very flat-looking store, every X number of feet, it would change the facade so it looks nicer. So we're talking about things like that. We're talking about adding practical definitions for things like movie theaters and farmers markets, things like that. And then we can get into other items, but we're going to primarily be sticking to the items that were in the packet published online and emailed to some of you who got it earlier based on us having an upload issue. I think that's... Yeah.
a couple of the sort of biggest, in my opinion, biggest changes besides the fixing some back there. Was this published memo, was it posted online as well?
Yes.
Oh, was, okay. So, changing the, fixing the 75%, 25%, that's really important, because that wasn't there before. The other one that's probably big is removing the 25-acre minimum. That's a big,
Right.
objection that's a second I want to talk about.
Right. I will add, I suppose it's one of the spots that we will start off. So inherently there is something called a mixed-use building, which allows a combination of uses, and by definition, it permits residential and commercial office, medical, retail, I think maybe one other use that I'm not remembering off the top of my head. So those are permitted, but residential is inadvertently omitted in the beginning of the ordinance. So that is a proposed change that we can talk about. It also, because that type of 25-acre minimum doesn't exist for those types of projects. It exists for projects like Smithfield Gateway that would apply as a mixed-use development. So, the larger types of developments, that would apply to them as opposed to the smaller that already, might happen on, limited acreage that is not 25.
And it split, just to be clear, that in, 306, to the applicability, that 75%, 25 split means 75% must be non-residential.
Well,
And 25, up to a maximum of 25% residential, is that correct? Other way?
it would be the opposite. Presently, there is no
More
limit.
than 75, correct.
Right. So presently, there is no limit, which means someone who would know how to navigate the ordinances in a very, scurrilous way would be able to essentially build, 1,000 apartments and,
Bodega.
yeah, right.
For anyone following along, what they're talking about right now is in the mixed-use development, section 306.2.c. And it says, any project utilizing this mixed-use development option cannot contain more than 75% by either number or volume of overall dwelling units, and by whichever calculation is more restrictive, of residential housing of any type.
I think we arrived at 75%.
What's that, Dave?
How did we arrive at 75%? That seems high. When this goes in, basically what used to be a commercial district, and now we're allowed residential.
I think, as I remember, it was really by looking at, the Gateway project, mixed-use project, and how it's going to be built, which is pretty much, I think, 75% since it's, first floor, commercial, retail, and then 3 floors above that are, residential. I think, I'll get into it later, but, that's probably pretty much the best example we have of something that would fit that. So, I believe, and it's been a long time, it was thrown out because it was included because of that.
Seems high.
I agree with David, and I think that's very high. The whole intent initially was to try to curtail R1, R2, coming into the economic development zone, and now with that percentage, maybe it was arbitrary, Robert. I mean, you wrote it.
It's kind of arbitrary, but it was, just based on, let's say, that plan development, because that's sort of where it's going, let's say, as far as what we could envision.
What's the maximum number of stories again?
I think that's
Presently 4.
probably 4.
In a mixed-use development. It is not, I think it is 3 in a non-mixed-use development.
Well, it has to do with overall building height. You referenced that in your several places.
Yeah.
You talk about building height.
I don't know exactly what that building height is, but I can tell you that in University Ridge, where there are 3-story and 4-story buildings, they must be within our height limit because they were approved.
Yeah.
Missy, perhaps, I don't know if you're familiar with other ordinances and what type of ratio they have in other areas for residential to commercial in a single structure.
Yeah, I'm not familiar.
No, that's okay. It's important to talk about these things. Yeah, my feeling is that because the original ordinance intended to permit, some aspect of residential in that zone, where someone could, say, build a restaurant and a few apartments above board, just like a Main Street or a Crystal Street, where it's still, very hometown-y, it's not exactly a, city, they would permit something like that.
I've got an answer for you. In ordinance number 237, section 306, 3D, it says building height, the minimum height for the first, I'll slow down. Ordinance 237, section 306, incentivized development option. Section number 3, and then D is in David. Building height, the minimum height for the first floor shall be 15 feet. Refer to section 511.20.c for maximum building height regulations. That is a different spot in our ordinance, but that spot does say that our regulations are 40 feet, but allows additional, but plus 10 feet with a maximum of 60 for each plus 10 feet of front yard setback afforded. And this also includes for things like having the air conditioners on top when you pipe them with the top.
With the mechanicals on top, but is
60
it,
feet excluding those,
the mechanicals,
Yes.
if they're on the top?
and peaked roofs, decorative, that kind of thing.
Right, so it'd be a maximum of 60 feet, something like, was it that suites down here, the relative new hotel? They went over 37 a foot, but because there was absolutely no occupied property or development, above the 35 foot. And again, this has gotta be something that when we go this high, we definitely have to include our local fire companies.
So, I guess I'm gonna ask on this question, and David's question. So first of all, that 75-25 split is for mixed-use development options. Is it the same for a mixed-use building? Because I don't remember seeing that, it could be. Is it the same 75-25 split?
Well, that would certainly be my thinking. It's not,
It's not clear from the ordinance.
Clear in the ordinance at all.
Is that
Right.
the case?
right, the existing ordinance does not have, any such, requirements, so be it
And that's
70,
important because if we're looking at single buildings,
right,
where mixed-use building is allowed versus mixed-use development, then that is one percentage that should probably be reviewed, and then the mixed-use development option might be different.
right,
But I would make an argument also that there could be a, it might make sense for mixed-use, building to ensure that the first floor is only commercial. I mean, I don't know if you wanna do that, but I mean, that's sort of what was envisioned, right?
oh, yeah.
First floor is commercial, if you wanna do apartments above, you can do that, but.
Yeah, I think that, that approach would make the most sense. I think if it's probably better to split the mixed-use development option and the mixed-use building option, given that they're made for entirely different types of, tracts of land. Only a Smithfield Gateway can realistically apply under mixed-use development, given that you have to be, between two state roads and have, a huge number of acreage.
But that's not the case in the new mixed-use development, now it's anywhere.
Right.
And the new mixed-use development is no 25-acre limit, so anyone could do a 75-25 split in two different buildings. Right, and that's how I read it, I just wanna make sure that's correct.
The answer to that is sort of. Currently, what we have enacted is mixed-use development and the incentivized development option, both of which exist right now.
Right.
In short, what this is suggesting is to eliminate all of the mixed-use development options, take our incentivized development option, rename it mixed-use, and replace it. So currently, there is an option that any developer could take that would bypass that 25-acre minimum through incentivized development instead of going through mixed-use.
Right, and the incentivized development is making sure it looks a certain way, and all these splits and heights and all that stuff.
Both of them do have similar things like that, yes.
Right.
In general, the mixed-use development option is a lot more restrictive. Let me take that back. There are more rules, around that. For example, there's something about having steep slopes in the mixed-use development, and if they were constructed, less than 50 years ago, you get to ignore a certain provision and whatnot. But the incentivized option that we're looking at using right now does currently exist and is currently enacted. And we're just looking at renaming that and shifting that over and calling it mixed use now. That's one of the big shifts.
It's already there.
Right, and my feeling is, I know we all have a draft ordinance. Drafts, like anything, are imperfect. I would suggest, because mixed-use option, or the mixed-use development option is so, integral to, ongoing projects or, existing tracks, that maybe it's best to just strengthen the standards and incentivize and leave the mixed-use option for what it is, rather than, can, that piece of legislation. That way, you have, the three sets of standards, one that's mixed-use buildings, one that's mixed-use development option, one that's incentivized option. And both, or all three, may have their respective places, in the township based on, your land size.
But you're talking about striking the 25-acre minimum.
Well, I think 25 acres is arduous, particularly for, a use that's already permitted, which is the mixed-use building.
Why do we even have it? We spent 3.5 years finalizing, most of the people in this room, finalizing that ordinance that was passed in July of 2020, and this is a major change to it.
No, that's saying the existing ordinance is a mixed-use building.
Yeah, right. And of 25 acres, there was a reason for it.
And 25 acres does not apply to a mixed-use building, it applies to mixed-use development.
despite the size of the lot.
Right, mixed-use development requires,
I guess what I'm saying is, I've got 10 acres, and it's gonna be mixed use, and 75% of that can be residential. Robert, was your intent?
If I can jump in here, it depends on if you, as the ordinance stands right now, it depends on if you're qualifying under mixed-use development or the incentivized development option.
Well,
There is a provision in the current mixed-use development that if you want to do any work on, if you want to have any residential uses on that, you have to have 10 acres of commercial development already developed before you can put in any residential. Feasibly speaking, if you had an acre that was, so if you had a property that was 25 acres mandated in this, and actually I believe, now that I'm speaking, I think there's a provision in there that you have to have 50 acres if you want to do residential
Right.
development.
That's what it says.
Yeah, so then 10 of it would have to be, at minimum, 10 of it would have to be commercial and developed first. So you'd actually be looking at a 20-80 split. But, carry on.
That's currently.
Currently
Right.
in the mixed-use development, yes.
right, presently, someone could use the mixed-use development option to build, some commercial, the 10 acres, and then they can build a retirement community, which is a lot of single-family dwellings. I think that it wouldn't be unreasonable for someone to want to build an apartment, build a couple apartments above a restaurant that they would open in the township. Both would bring good jobs and, a stable, housing market to the township while also preserving the commercial nature of the zone. I'm not suggesting that we're going to allow people to build 100 apartments as long as they build supermarkets. I'm suggesting that people, don't think that building something like Crystal Street is unreasonable in this township. I think that if someone's gonna build something nice, I think that provided they meet all the standards on the aesthetics and on whatever ratio would ultimately be decided upon, that they could reasonably build some apartments along with their project, just like a lot of other growing and rural suburban townships.
Well, I think this all goes back to the question of, what do we want for Smithfield? What's the future going to be here? And then in the 2020 census, we came out with the highest growth rate of anywhere in the county. We were 8.3%. I think the township that was nearest us was about half that. I don't know where all those people are going, but that's what the census says. And I think we're going to see a lot of growth here for various reasons. One is, I think permanent changes in the way people work and where they want to work because of the pandemic. It's closer to the closest, let's say, to the metropolitan area to our east. There's a lot of reasons, besides the fact it's beautiful and we like it, that Smithfield is someplace where a lot of people are going to want to live. The question is, where are they going to live? I don't think we have the room or maybe even the market for building more 2,500 and 3,500 square foot tract homes. I think we're going to have to find some other way of housing people. And one of these is what Tom Comita suggested to us 3 years ago. He was a urban planner from Philadelphia that we hired, which is, you could call it the clustered community, which is a group of townhomes, maybe a few single-family, smaller homes clustered around a commercial development. So people could go to the market, go to the drugstore. They could walk there if they wanted to. Unfortunately, we don't have many places for that, and he was postulating that maybe where Mountain Manor is would someday be that. Well, that's one kind of mixed use, and in that, maybe the ratio is 50-50, 40-60, I don't know, but it's one version of what we're talking about. The other version is, let's say, if you take something like University Ridge, which I assume somebody, or most of you have either seen or could go up there. It's very well designed. It is 3- and 4-story apartment buildings. But if you took the first floors of all those apartment buildings and said, okay, this has got to be retail, the developer doesn't really get that first floor. What he gets is about maybe 70 or 80%, because part of that is going to be lobbies, part of it is going to be elevator shafts, part of it is going to be mail rooms, package rooms, all that kind of stuff. So maybe the ratio there, if it's a 3- or 4-story, let's call it dense development, it should be more like 80-20, because the 25 is really going to be 20 anyway. So you've got two different things here, and then we're talking about Crystal Street, where somebody may want to build a building and build apartments above it, just like Troy Nauman is now doing on Cortlandt Street with his Brewski's building. So you've got three different things, and it seems like there are different ratios or different rules that should apply to all of them. And it makes it more complicated, but I think one of the reasons we're here is to talk about this stuff, because it is the future we're going towards.
I know we're not making decisions today, this is a discussion, but if I were to make a recommendation, we weren't going to talk about the 75-25 split anymore, I would say we probably should have a separate definition for that ratio for mixed-use building versus mixed-use development, which is not the case right now. And I think we should probably revisit those percentages, and look at them, because I do think they're going to be different per building, and there might be other ways to do a split. There could be a requirement that the whole main first floor is exclusively commercial in a mixed-use building. That guarantees you don't have a bodega in the corner, even a big one, with a lot of other residential. And then, we might want to look at what that means for a 15-acre property if you're losing at 25 acres, and what a 75-25 split would look like in such a case, and if that's what we want, or if that's not what we want.
Well,
and I do want, last thing on that, it wasn't clear to me in there, whether that was gonna be deed restricted. So if someone has a 25, let's say 20-acre property and does a 75-25 split, and they decide to, subdivide that property, and they divide out the residential, then do they now have a new property that's only, 5 acres, and then they can now again do another split and add more residential? So you just want to make sure it's deed restricted.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I also think there's a provision in the existing ordinance that only applies to mixed-use developments, that, some sort of provision that, allows for subdivisions, but does not permit ultimately, more apartments based on that.
Right.
But we'd have to see if that applies to a different owner or something like that.
What would prevent him from saying he couldn't rent the commercial space out when nobody's looking, and turn it into residential? How do we prevent that?
That's why it's got to be restricted.
Yeah.
Robert, you mentioned vision for the township. Maybe you can help me out a little bit. Exactly what is your vision? What are the supervisors' visions for the township? Because some of the talk sounds like vision might be to create a high-density population, residential environment, more like a big city.
well,
And if that's your vision, then I think it's important to me as a resident to know that. I might not agree with it, and, I'll tell you, I wouldn't necessarily. Or is your vision to really expand the commercial development?
I can say for myself, my greatest priority is to preserve open space and the natural environment. And the best way I can think of doing that is to cluster a living situation so that we're not expanding into more and more tract developments here, and we're leaving most of the township in its natural state. And in fact, we're not going to bring this up today because I'm still researching it, but it may be that we want to develop what's called a land bank, where we can say that if you have a development and you need more latitude, let's say, you can buy credits from this land bank that are given to us or are created by people who give the township land that we want along streams in open space along aquifers so that, we can continually preserve more and more open space, but that there's let's say, an incentive because, you get a credit in the land bank, and if a developer comes in and needs something, he can buy that. So that at least we're trading open space for, let's say, density development. But my goal, first of all, is preserve open space as much as possible. But we've got to say that practically, that you've got to do it because with giving people a place to live. People want to live here.
Well, what's your vision for the population density? Is it to double the population from 10,000 to 20,000 in the township?
I can't say who's going to want to live here, and I don't know. I just know that it's really surprising that 8.3% more people are here than were here 10 years ago. And we're the leading area in the county for population growth. I don't know. I'm just going by those figures, assuming there's something here that's attractive.
Maybe I just ask your, not so much your concerns, but your thoughts on this. Robert speaks for Robert, and he has his own vision. And particularly this revision that we're looking at right now is Robert's, not mine. I had nothing to say about it. I'm at a public meeting now to talk about it. I've done some homework on it. He shared the information with us. Jacob, I don't know what your input was or was not, but we're here now with pretty much the coloring of one man's vision. And I want you to know that not necessarily applies to me, and I can't speak for Jacob.
This is true because I worked on this with Ron trying to do revisions, but it was all towards saying, let's bring it to everybody to talk about it. Somebody has to do the legwork, and we were really doing this.
I want to piggyback on Mitch's comment. You had said that your objective is to preserve open space. This ED, new zoning, doesn't do anything to that. And because you still have the opportunity to develop other pieces of land that are already designated residential. So this doesn't do anything to preserve open space. All I'm seeing it doing is increasing the population. And what happened at Smithfield Gateway, I mean, I like the idea when it originally started, where he had some apartment usage, but now he's got, the apartments on the hill, plus he's got 3 floors, so he's doubled his apartments on that property. So what we're going to be doing by having this ED zoning is to increase the population even more, and not necessarily preserving open space.
Well, can I speak for a moment? I want to say, to anyone that hasn't looked at the census, we grew by 610 people over 10 years, which amounted to a little over 8%. I would venture to say most people, got a new neighbor or something like that. My plan certainly wouldn't be to overnight just say, oh yes, because we're just under 8,000. My plan would not be to say, oh, okay, I'm going to work to create a new zone that doubles the population to 16,000. That's not what my idea is at all. Clearly, as Robert has said, a lot of people do want to live here because we have an amazing access to our natural, habitats. We have amazing parks in our township owned by both the township, the national park, regional parks. There's a lot of exciting things with that. And COVID has changed the way that people are working. There's remote work that, people either do at something that was once called WeWork, where they would, go to an office with other people doing remote work, maybe not even for the same, company. That was an interesting, concept. The idea of the ED zone was to allow for a balance of uses that includes all sorts of commercial businesses. It's by and large no replacement of the original ED zone. There are syntax errors, and then there's debate on other stuff. I think that I appreciate the work that our solicitor and Robert did on this draft. I don't agree with everything that's in it, but that's why we're here to talk about it. I think it's important. I'll call on you in a second, Doug. I think that, Robert does address a very real problem, which is that there are people that are going to want to live here, and there's not going to be, space. I'm not suggesting build apartment buildings. I'm not suggesting build a bunch of townhomes, but I think that there deserves to be some versatility for land that is already commercial, and that has been commercial for a long time. I worked hard with, the individuals sitting here and some that are no longer with us, on this zone last year, and by and large, I think it's a really great product that needs a little TLC because there's some gaps. There's one area where it says, $XX, where it should really reflect that the board would set, that fee every year as opposed to, having a blank. There's inadvertent, prohibitions on residential despite the definition permitting it. There's things like that. I think there's a lot of room for debate, but I think not an individual here, wants to harm the integrity of the township. Robert lived in a lot of cities, and he chose to spend his time here, and he's been here for, 15 plus years. I was born in East Stroudsburg, so I lived here all of my life. Nobody here wants to change the character of our neighborhood. This is about, planning for the future and figuring out, how to plug some of these holes. Doug, you had your hand.
David, I think we're gonna say the same thing. David mentioned last week and again tonight, I think it might help. I may be wrong, but, Brian recalls this. And if it sends us down a rabbit hole, I don't want to start. I want to also thank you guys for doing the legwork and the spade work that you've done, especially you, Robert. I understand how hard it's been. There's been a lot of man hours put into it. But prior to all of this, there was the idea, part of a few people here in the township, that we needed to gird our loins for growth. That there was gonna be growth, and there was nothing we could do about it. And at that point in time, developers were coming in loaded for bear. They were coming in below the radar, lawyered up. There was really not much we could do. There was very little protection. The plain was wide open. It was a battlefield, and it was wide open, and they owned it. And there were ways to defend against it. Brian was one of the first to really come up with that sort of thing, where let's identify parcels, let's protect the green space, let's enlist the help of people who could think those big thoughts and bring them on board, and he did do that. Then we had Randall Arendt back when, who was a visionary, a guy that came in and he ran workshops, and we did those workshops with Randall Arendt. And one of the things Randall Arendt was emphasizing was let's take a model, let's take a small thing and see if we can make it better. Let's see if we can do a 10-block square development of mixed-use residential / let's do a Crystal Street, a grid of Crystal Street. Let's take Jay Park and Marshall's Creek Shopping Center and Mountain Manor and divide that out and see what it would look like. Let's try and build a what-if around that. And we did do that. We did those exercises. And then we got Tom Committa. And Tom Committa came in. And he picked up where we left off with Randall Arendt, and he laid down a grid. And he put up some pretty pictures and color swaps and proposed elevations and so forth, and so aesthetic tests and aesthetic examples. And that sounded pretty good too. And then we got into, all due respect to Boucher and James, Judy and her, codification. Now this thing doesn't resemble any, due respect, this thing doesn't resemble anything we were talking about then. We're really getting tangled up, Jacob, in our proverbials here. There's so many terms and so many sections, and there's so much complication when our whole purpose, and it's not, if you recall what Tom Committa said, let's make it simple, so our ordinance book is the size of a golden book, fairy tale book. There's a tiny little thing, so that our ordinances are flexible and can cover everything while at the same time being simple. I don't know if I'm being clear here, but I just wanted to backtrack a little bit and just remember a little of the history and how we got it.
Well, Doug, I don't want to interrupt you, but thanks for jogging my memory. We've been working at this for a long, long time, and we spent a hell of a lot of money to get to July 20. And now I sit down and I see that it's been major changes, as you just said. And when I say meetings like these, and public meetings and joint meetings with the developing community, dozens and dozens. We started in early 2016, and spent a lot of money, and it was well spent. 3 excellent planners, and when I think we asked Chairman Amori to sit with Jason Spitari before us and make a presentation, and unanimously, we all agreed that we really thought we did a good job on it. We had the good planners. They listened to us. We listened to them. The public, I don't know how many public meetings, Scott, I'm sure you probably remember more because you wanted to go fishing probably, but so I just felt this confidence finally that I think we've got what we really want. And now someone implied there was a rush to judgment. And for God's sakes, that many years, that much investment, and it was just July 2020 when it was enacted. So that's when.
I want to, again, add on to what Doug said. My recollection at the start of this was we were trying to find a way to improve the buildings along the Milford Road corridor. And we started with the Marshall Creek Village, and we were working down towards Eagle Valley. That was the original discussion. How can we make that better? And that's when we got Tom Schmidt involved, and we started looking at this mixed use. And now all of a sudden we've got the entire, I'll call it circle, 447, Severn Bridge, Milford, that's basically our circle of roads. It's the whole thing, and we're in essence allowing, it was going to be a small district. It wasn't going to be the whole township. Now we've got everything. We've totally wiped out B1, C1, and M1 out of it. And we're allowing residential in every piece of commercial property. That wasn't my original vision of what we were going to do. We were going to only focus on the Milford Road section, try it out, and not 3 floors of residential and 1 floor of commercial. More, maybe 1 floor of residential, just something to kind of entice people for like mom and pop shops where the owner lived above and they had storage below. So this has gone way beyond what I originally expected, and all this is really doing is increasing the township population.
I want to speak to that for a second. You know, everybody that's here, for the most part, voted on the original ED zone last year, which got rid of the C1 and C2, B1 and B2 zones and put them into the ED zone. Everybody voted on these map amendments, so I would have liked to have heard some opposition then. However, you know, they're already zoned ED.
There was no opposition. It was unanimous when when we passed that ordinance, initial ED ordinance. It was July 20th.
Yes,
2020.
I know.
And there was no opposition.
That's what I'm saying. So what I'm saying is,
you're saying now that you're hearing opposition, but this is the beginning, I hope, of not the first and last ordinance.
I'm hearing opposition too, but I'm hearing opposition stuff already allowed right now. I think that's the point. The ED zone is. I think it'd be useful to go through like what are the big contentious things, because as you said, you want a skinny version, you want a deeper dive version. I know the main issue is that there are loopholes in the current system because there were some little errors that basically does allow someone to do a massive residential unit with a tiny little corner store, they could do that right now. So I think we wanna make sure that that gets closed.
Correct.
But it sounds like the 25 acre is an issue, the percentage breakdown of whether it's a building or a development is an issue. I haven't heard anybody else has any major issues that they saw. I mean, I saw a lot of definitions. I have like 4 other things that I think would be helpful, because part of me thinks that we're not gonna tackle those percentage issues right now.
Sure.
No, I think you're right.
Not something to do in one day.
Well, no, we're not gonna do it one day, but in about 7 days, we're gonna find out how much more of that 8% we actually are here. And that is because the schools in this county are about to open. And we're gonna get a population census of all those people who were here, the COVID refugees for the last year and a half, who've been living out in these houses with extra family members, because the cars are out there. They never even retitled their vehicles. And nobody in those districts that were in New York and New Jersey, the close ones to us, which is why this is gonna happen here whether we like it or not. Okay? Those people are going to have to do something, because if they're gonna come back in, if they're going to go brick and mortar schools everywhere, which it looks like they're going to, they're going to either have to have made a decision or gonna have to make one very shortly. Okay, because they could get away with hiding out here because of bandwidth. Robert heard me say this before. What we didn't have 20 years ago is the availability of high-speed internet on a broad basis. You see me over here tapping. Well, this is because I'm sitting here on my iPad. I couldn't do this 5 years ago. I'm looking at the various TV zones. You see me when I bring these to the meetings. This is how I look at it. So these people are here. So the question becomes are we going to initially address some of these, the technical problems, as you said, the skinny word. That has to be addressed. All right, but in terms of what do we want the township to look like, it's going to look like what's going to look like in 5 years, whether we like it or not. So if we don't make some adjustments here to try to channel what this township is going to become, because I've lived here since I was 3. I'm now 51, and it's not going to look like it looked when I was 10. Okay, irrespective of whether I like that or don't like that, because I'm still here and I still have my family here and all the rest of it. That's if I didn't care, I wouldn't have been sitting here for the last 5 or 6 years, volunteering countless hours, to do these things. The technical things need to be addressed. The broader part, I'm not quite ready to necessarily tackle broader zoning problems, I'll say you call it the omnibus, whatever.
Yeah.
That's okay. I'm not ready to see that yet until we see who's here and fix up these problems and see if we get a project or two in this way.
Yeah.
That can use it. I think there are, as Michael said, there are some real things. We don't want the corner store in 62 apartments.
Right.
All right, I'm not necessarily sure we want to go adjust too much in terms of the acreage thing also, but we can certainly discuss that. I don't have a final feeling. But I do know this, the township is going to change. And it is changing as we sit here, and we're going to find out in a week. They either have to register and go to school here in the East Stroudsburg or the various other districts, or they're going to somehow go back to where they were living in New Jersey. Probably not. They probably spread elsewhere as well. But they're going to, we'll see who is here to remain. I think we may be shocked, actually. I have no inside information, but I think we may actually be shocked as to what happens with the school population here between now and the end of September. So I do think the technical things are important, because those people are here, they're not just using bandwidth for their use, they are going to require services. We sat here all last year and marveled at what the hell's going on because our grocery stores are constantly, right?
Well, they're wiped out constantly because we had an extra 30 or 40,000 people living here in all likelihood with no additional commercial infrastructure. You can't feed that many. These things, you just have to look around. How many of those are gonna stay? Well, we don't know, but we're gonna have to fix the technical part before we even move on to omnibus wholesale changes.
I agree.
And that's my opinion here, as, you know, one volunteer guy on this side of the table.
I appreciate that, Scott. That's why I, formulated today. I think there are things that have to be done now, and then there are things that we can debate. We can debate, acreage and different things. I think we do have to, look at, allowing the mixed-use buildings to focus as the definition allows them. I think that, it's unfair to deny an option that they explicitly should be permitted just because of an oversight in the beginning of the ordinance. I also think we have to add the definitions for things like I, have said a million times, the flower shops, the bakeries, the wireless communications facility, and movie theater. Things like that have to be tackled. I think that, there's gonna be a larger debate on the acreage and on, the ratio of things, and I think, like Michael said, there's probably going to have to be a few different standards, because we all know no project is the same as another, but mixed-use building is gonna be very different than mixed-use development, which is gonna be different from an incentivized development. They all have their own purposes, so I definitely didn't envision anything getting done today other than a discussion.
The beginning.
Yeah.
Can I just interject one thing? We're talking about a lot of different things. We talked about the 8%, I think it was 8.25%, right? Smithfield Township, and that surprised me. But, what we're not talking about is the cost of educating a student in Monroe County, in Smithfield Township and East Stroudsburg High School, and the pittance that we get back, literally. If we get $14,000, it costs almost $29,000. That gap is going to be made up by all of us. I'm going to ask a question. Please don't get mad at me. We just recently got our tax bill for our school. Can I raise a hand of people that got that tax bill? Some were, some stayed the same. Some, I think, were raised. I know myself and several other people that I know were substantially raised. I'll live with that. And some were lowered. But the idea of this is we pay in East Stroudsburg School District, very, very high tax. And we're going to see that coming to fruition this tax cycle. It's the gap. Now, maybe with ARP and things like that, we can help each other help the situation. But as it is right now, when it's $7,000 or $8,000, $9,000 that you have to make up, and that's each one of us in this room that raised our hand and pays taxes on our property this year. Just wanted to bring that up. My philosophy, it's common sense. The right projects in the right places in development. We don't have to rush to accommodate vast increases in population, single and mixed-use dwellings and residentials. And we don't have to develop everything that is possibly developed in our beautiful Smithfield Township. Yes, sir.
And that's why, to echo David, the right projects in the right place, that was a mantra throughout the years that we looked at this. And that's why, starting small, creating a model, David pointed out, Milford Road, Marshall's Creek Shopping Center to Eagle Valley. That was a focus of our concentration. What would we do? How would our vision support a better development process along that strip? And then apply those same rules to Seven Bridges and 447. But it was not intended to be all at once. And when Tom Camino left off and we began the process with Shane James,
then that was when things started to change. But I still wanted to point something out. This format, okay, is what we all saw a year ago, okay? It was, and I'll read it to you. This is on page 6 and 7. The headings are Smithfield Township zoning ordinances, schedule of district regulations. On the left is district intent. The next box over is principal permitted uses. The next box is conditional uses. The next box is accessory uses, and then development standards. This was a very good outline that began long about Tom Comita. And this is what Tom Comita was talking about a 12-page ordinance book. There it is. That's the ordinance. That's the ED ordinance. Right there. 2 pages. Okay? And it's all the uses. I'm sorry, it's more than 2 pages. It's 3 pages. But it's all the different uses we can imagine put into those categories that I just mentioned. Very easy to read, very, very easy to categorize. And that's what we, the Planning Commission, basically looked at a year and a half ago in the lead up to the Supervisors' passage of the ED ordinance. I don't understand the point. What's the point?
The point I'm making is that all this complexity, these pages and pages that we're looking at here, I understand we need definitions and all that stuff, we need to fine tune it. And Robert, you said it a year ago. We know that we're going to probably have to revisit and come back and amend and do all the grunt work and spade work that's necessary to do. But I think if we all just sort of remember that that's what we started with, and that's still what it is, pretty much. Maybe we can proceed ahead with going back now to the model, as Brian just pointed out, start small, start with projects that we like, projects that work, projects that add to the value of the township, rather than just sort of trying to codify everything and lumping it all together.
But it's already there. I don't know why I'm sorry, but this is, we're gonna get to 11 o'clock at night. The ED zone's already passed, already up there.
That's what I said.
I know that. And that's the same one that's going forward. I'm just trying to understand the point.
Well, it's not the same one going forward, and it's nowhere near the same one going forward.
Well, that's why I started to be, I'm sorry.
That's why you've got both of these.
One of the big, there's a lot of changes, they're mostly syntax, mostly little nuances, and there's some
Not true.
big changes.
That's not true.
Well, so what are the big changes? 25 acres, 75-25, a redefinition of mixed-use building, and
Eliminate design surfaces, and that was something that was alluded to, that we would add them. Design surface. This is, I think, this may have even come from you and Rob.
Where?
This is on this sheet here.
So you're talking about Ron Karasak's memo?
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree that I'm sorry, Brian,
Well,
I
eliminate,
actually think we should not
it's
change-
not modify. What I'm saying, it's eliminate design standards. And then go to a simple thing, and this just blows my mind. A bed and breakfast with a revised division to eliminate the language of owner occupied.
but it now says you must be on premises, just change the definition.
Yeah, well,
Is it not? Maybe I misread it.
Mike, no, you're correct, Michael.
no, it says here that it's a revised definition to eliminate the existing language of owner occupied.
And what is the new definition, Julia? It's basically the same thing.
The proposed definition of bed and breakfast is 1 or 2 adjacent properties located in the ED zone district with a single-family residential dwelling located thereon, and where guests are present, where breakfast must be provided, and where the property owner or authorized representative is/are physically present on the property while guests are present. The definition complements but does not supersede the definition of bed and breakfast as per Township Ordinance number 133, as that definition continues to apply in the non-ED zone district.
Let me ask you this then, You can have a couple of bed and breakfasts. Do they have to be on the same lot
Or adjacent,
or adjacent?
It has to be a single.
I know who wrote that. No comment.
It has to be a single-family home, right? Remember, we're just talking about the
We're
ED
talking
zone.
about bed and breakfast.
In the ED zone, not in the residential zone. That doesn't change at all.
We're
It's just the ED zone,
in the ED zone, right.
only in the ED.
Oh, neither. The ED zone is going to be 9/10 of the community.
I don't think so. Right now, you can have a bed and breakfast
The
in
map
R1.
is right over there,
R2 and
only the
R1.
red, only the red on that map behind that woman is the ED zone.
You don't think
It's not
that's
9/10.
significant?
It's not 9/10 of the community by acreage or by population.
Nor does it affect anything in the
Because
residential
no one lives,
zone.
hardly anyone lives in the ED zone. Only the existing non-conforming B1 homes that existed are in the zone.
Okay. But, I mean, Brian, I agree that there's some big ones that I personally don't think should come to skinny. I don't know why the 25 acres is being removed, because that was there as a protection. It has to be a big property if you want to mix use zone. Because you can still allow mixed use buildings anywhere, right? But then you need to make sure that the definition of mixed use building is clear,
Right.
so that it's not, this was a way to stay from too much residential.
Yeah.
And then I think you should look at the 75-25 split. I think it sounds like what I hear from here, there's a lot of people that think that's too much residential. The other thing that I would recommend, because we had this conversation at the planning commission meeting, I'm not sure the definition of mixed use alone is clear.
Mhm.
Because we talked about, is mixed use a combination of residential and anything else? Or does it mean two different commercial uses? Because we don't define anything as commercial use or business, because there's no commercial district anymore.
Right.
And I will say, the ED zone says permitted uses and lists a bunch of things. So I would interpret a mixed use as I can have more than one of those.
Right.
But many of those could all be commercial, as we define it.
Right.
So it could be retail and office.
You got retail and office, or are you allowed to have hotel with a lobby and, without giving one other example,
Shooting range.
a shooting range? That's a mixed.
It is.
So I just want to make sure that that is clear. And then, what was my last? I don't want to go on. Multiple uses. Okay, my last thought, just, I don't know if it's even possible, but it seems like the whole residential question is one of the big questions. Maybe the residential is the thing that goes to a conditional use? Because then if you want to do on a point-by-point basis,
That would make sense. I think that
I don't
would.
know what you think about that, Brian. If the residential was conditional, it would have to go for the township, for someone to do anything residential.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
No, I agree.
One of the things that we wanted to try to do by creating that was to show what could be done without having to come in all lawyered up and go to the planning commission and start with conditions upon conditions. You know that, so right. So the question really is, how can we build the ordinance so that it's simple, but also clear, and we wind up with a positive effect?
One of the great things of your table is that in an ED zone, there's tons of permitted commercial uses, which makes it faster.
Right.
We thought that was kind of fun.
Yeah, what Jason's trying to do is make sure the definitions are sound. I get that.
But I agree that the residential point is a big point of contention. So if that's a big point of contention, make that conditional, because it still can be mixed use if we're saying that these different commercial uses are mixed.
Right. True.
So what you're saying is that if they're in the ED zone, if there is a proposed residential use in the mix, that part of it would have to be conditioned.
Right, and that allows you to do something where you say, this is a 60-building apartment, you can't do it because we've talked to the school district and there's no way to handle it. The condition is it can only be retirement, or it has to be senior citizens. So those are all those conditions you could reasonably place on it. But are they reasonable? Does that make, Ron's the conditional use guy. Are they reasonable?
Right.
Are they rezoned?
That'll be in the court.
Exactly, that's.
David, go ahead.
I know that we were asked to look at this lightly and because of these syntax corrections, but I dove deep into it. And there's something in here that maybe I don't understand that I would like clarification. When you look on page 2, section 3, 201, it says, Smithfield Township Ordinance 27, blah, 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 names of district is repealed and reinstated in its entirety as follows. So, you've got these districts here, R1, R2, RC, and you have M1 listed.
Mhm.
But somewhere else in there, M1 was repealed. Then you go to page 9, section 16, and it says, M1 conditional uses is repealed and reinstated in its entirety as follows. All uses permitted in the EP district as conditional use. Then it has airports, distribution plants, laboratories, outdoor storage facilities, paper mills, quarries, blah, blah, blah. I interpret that those uses are permitted in an ED zone.
No, that they are only permitted in the M1 zone. Ron can clarify that's, the restating things is just to make it so he doesn't have to go section by section and strike through every individual old piece of information.
Right.
Yeah, that's that, but I don't understand, to me, it's conditional.
Ron, you explained that to us at one point where it was fairly simple, where you strike the M1 zone, David, out of the ordinance as it presently exists, and then you reinstate it in its entirety.
With the changes.
With the change.
And I can tell everyone here today, I am hearing for the first time that we are talking about 3 different types of uses. I never knew that. I assumed mixed development meant you had a mixed-use building in it. Now I'm told mixed-use building is something separate and distinct that needs its own standards versus a mixed-use development, which is separate and distinct that needs its own standards, versus an incentivized development option, which is separate and distinct and needs its own standards. First time I'm hearing that is now.
Well, I think it's the first time that it ever came up that, Michael brought up, because mixed-use buildings are already a principal permitted use in the ED zone. Michael only brought up that, it might have, a different standard, and I elaborated on that with my own thinking, but it was always there as a principal permitted use.
Well, I'm still confused because the mixed-use building is permitted in the mixed-use or the ED zone, and there's a definition for mixed-use buildings. So again, are we separating this out, or are we making it part of mixed-use development?
I was just saying that right now you can have a mixed-use building anywhere in the ED zone. It does not have to be a mixed-use development. The mixed-use building does not define what percentage of your building is residential versus commercial. And therefore, you could technically build a giant single building in a less than 25-acre zone.
Much less.
That had a tiny corner store, right? Is that not correct? That's how it.
Right, yeah, so
You have 75% of that building, by volume.
You can have more than that.
Residential.
You can have more because it's not, the percentage is
right,
defined.
there's no standard in the existing ordinance that regulates the ratio of any given use to another use in a mixed-use building.
The building.
That exists for a mixed-use development, like something like Smithfield Gateway. That, a mixed-use development is very different than a mixed-use building. A mixed-use development is a, 25 to 50 acre large tract that has,
Gateway.
right, it's essentially Smithfield Gateway. Someone can write down this date. I doubt that there's going to be 10 more Smithfield Gateways that want to build on the other parcels. Projects like that are not incredibly common. They are, they're common probably in some of the other municipalities you've worked in, Missy, right? But it's not like one pops up every year. There's very limited applicability to parcels.
Now, let's just go back to Michael. The mixed-use building.
Right.
The building, the one building on 2.6 acres
Sure.
of commercial, formerly known as commercial land, but land in the ED zone along one of the state roads, okay? There it is. It's on Seven Bridges Road. It's 2.6 acres. And a guy wants to build a single building, mixed use. Okay, now,
There's no guidelines.
Michael is pointing out that going just by what he's read and what we've got here, you could build 10 apartments and 7.5 of them could be residential, or 10 spaces.
What's confusing is, in the ordinance later, it says you can't have residential, but then it defines mixed-use development as, or mixed-use building as residential.
Residential.
So it's wrong, the ordinance on its own has a clear error.
Right, and I know that's not the intent, but.
Right, so we need to fix that, and the question is, which direction do you fix it?
Right, you have to decide what ratio, so that's something that we should, talk about. Obviously, I don't think it'll be done today, but it's something that we should perhaps look at other ordinances and see what their standards are, because like Michael has said, presently, if we were to fix just the syntax error, which permits the residential and mixed-use building as it is defined in the old ordinance, as it exists, somebody could build, they could say, okay, this is my law office, and it is, one room out of 100 apartments, you could do that, and that would be permissible. We'd have to close the loophole to make sure that someone cannot do that.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting just because someone builds a bakery that they can build 100 apartments, but if, for example, on Main Street, there might be 4 apartments above, one floor that's like kitchen chemistry or something like that. That's more of what I'm thinking as opposed to just straight apartment buildings. You have to offer something in order to benefit that, I think. And I think, a lot of people have shared the same, but it has to be clear what the guidelines are.
We'd all talked about that, about an apartment above mom and pop.
Mom and pop, right?
So maybe just the mixed-use building needs to be defined that way, that the ground floor must be entirely commercial.
Which you said half an hour ago.
Yeah.
I mean, does that solve, Brian, the challenge that you saw with that part of it?
I think it does. Again, unforeseen consequences of the results. I have to look into it more, but it does make sense. What I'm seeing right now is we've got a really good discussion going, and we're going to get to the point where we're not going to make decisions, and maybe we should really roll up our sleeves and have another work session, and go. And I'm saying, and not that we didn't do our homework, but my God, there's volume to the stuff that we've been going through, and then revisions to the revisions, and additions. Yep.
Well, I continue to be confused, which I guess is not that surprising based upon, how lawyers think, but, I mean, you have the ordinance, section 305, that says mixed-use development. That's the separate ordinance.
Right.
Or, I guess, Smithfield Gateway, okay?
Yeah.
And then here you have section 306, mixed-use development. Well, what are we talking about then? I'm still confused as to what is this mixed-use development? How is that different than section 305 mixed-use development? They use the same language.
But,
And if it is gonna be different, then we need to know that, or at least I need to know that to be able to draft
Julia, do
things.
you wanna?
this is your memo, right?
Yes.
And in the memo, it says repeal of existing 305 mixed use and replace with section 306.
Correct.
That's what we're doing, right?
No, that's suggested, but if it's not being done,
Oh.
again, then I'm saying, I'm hearing today that we need to have 3 separate use standards, one for mixed-use building, one for mixed-use development, which may be the same as the 305, and one for incentivized development, which is this 306, although it's called mixed-use development. This is very confusing to me as to what exactly we are doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ron, can I say something, and then we can proceed to hear anyone's final thoughts and then public comments, because we have our own Board of Supervisors meeting in, an hour and 45 minutes. We want, well, yes, I just said public comment. So, the way I envision it, and it may be different than some other individuals, but for the sake of simplicity, it seems there are groups either actively or that have already applied as mixed-use development, and maybe it's better to just leave that alone. I know the proposal that you two had worked on repeals that and calls the incentivized zone, or incentivized option, mixed-use development.
Right.
So I would say, leave mixed use as it is, keep incentivized, because that already didn't have a 25-acre requirement, because again, I make the distinction between Smithfield Gateway and a mom-and-pop store with 4 apartments above it. I think that perhaps I don't know what changes would be made to incentivize, but I think to look at mixed-use building, maybe that needs other standards, because as it is right now, I mean, you could even say the standards in a mixed-use building also apply and incentivize, so you don't have to do, 3 separate, entirely different things. Because someone may well build a mixed-use building in an incentivized development. But I think we have to talk about how we're going to go about setting, the ratio, what's permissible, 1 floor for 1 floor, or is it gonna be something different? And, there's the acreage question, certain things, maybe some projects, with more acreage would be able to build more apartments. For example, if someone's mom and pop shop becomes the size of a Cracker Barrel, maybe 4 apartments is too few for what they're already doing in commercial business. I think there's options to talk about there, but I don't envision totally getting rid of mixed use or incentivized. I just think we have to clarify standards for mixed use buildings like Michael and others have talked about.
And I'm not gonna say anything else, because I know the public may wanna speak, but again, if you're saying mixed-use building, the first floor has to be commercial, like, fine, that helps me get a handle on this, because
Right.
if you look at this chart that was
Yeah.
talked to by Commissioner Schreiber, it tells you the minimum lot area is like a half an acre.
Right,
You don't need anything more than that
right.
in the ED zone, according to the ordinance as it presently exists.
Right.
You don't need more than a half an acre.
Ron, you and I have discussed this before, but this has always confused me. In the incentivized, it says, uses proposed as part of the project must be permitted within the underlying district. What does that mean?
Well, that's a leftover from that section 305 with Smithfield Gateway, in my opinion.
You could probably toss that then, because everything that's in the zone already has to be permitted in the zone, otherwise you can't do it. Otherwise, yeah,
I have probably about 2 hours worth of questions. I don't wanna go through it here.
understood.
Who can I meet with to just go through it so I can point out some of my comments and not take up the whole time? Find out which ones are important and which ones aren't.
You could meet with me, but I would understand half of it at this point, I think with both of us.
And if you understood both of it, then you got to a half, right? Maybe you could talk to Ron. I would suggest Ron, if Ron had the time and you could, conveniently meet.
No, but you can also meet with
Not you.
Julia too, so it's a $23 conversation, with all due respect, because we all have 2 hours worth of questions. So I think, once we have perhaps something that meets the intent of what we discussed here, because again, I think we need to have one ordinance that covers a couple of these things that we can get done by the end of this year, and then we can talk about the broader thing. I think,
Maybe the suggestion, the planning commission at our next meeting could review our thoughts, detail them out, 'cause maybe we can answer a question, or maybe we don't, and then present that as a recommendation.
And maybe we could have Julia present, because I really think that's a good idea. 'Cause
Yeah.
Julia's got squared away, she knows this stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, sounds like.
And I have a bunch of little ones too,
And
like,
can help guide us, is what I'm saying. We do have questions.
I don't know if like sidewalk is defined, does it have to be impervious, does it have to be like, just little things like that, 'cause you're requiring the sidewalk, but
yeah,
Well, it talks about design standards, and it says, the developer can use stone. Well, that's not a requirement. The word can.
Right,
is optional.
permissive.
So you really don't have defined standards. And the last time we had a meeting, we talked about lighting, and the lighting in here is very vague and generic. It doesn't talk about uniform lighting levels and glare and stuff. So there's a lot of things like that I think we can polish and make it better to avoid all of the issues that we discussed last.
Even before going forward on the major issue.
Right. Well, yeah, I think that's a good place to start with I ultimately envision that the so-called skinny ordinance is gonna be longer than the one that talks about the broader issues, but it fits in these very integral, critical issues that are important now and not exactly down the road unless we don't solve them now. So,
I also understand that the intent was just to review these syntax issues, but we have an opportunity to look at it again, and I think we need to look at it very thoroughly.
I agree.
And make it as good as it can be. And if it means changing it wholly, then that's what it has to be.
Yeah. That's good.
I agree.
So hearing all of the comments that were at this point and preparing everything for as we start, as everybody's saying, part of the discussion has been what's impact and what isn't. So one of the things that I would like to do, both for Ron Karasak and myself, and for everybody as we start to navigate all of this, is it okay with everybody if we go down through the permitted definitions? I do see that indoor shooting range is a conditional use, so I figured we'd skip that one for now. But see if anybody has any issue or concern with any of the definitions that we propose to add into this proposed ordinance.
Well, I think,
Yeah,
I think we should,
yeah.
we should at least discuss indoor shooting ranges, because I think there are people here that came because they have.
Okay.
Yes, we certainly intend to hear your public comments.
Then, is it okay if we go through all of the other definitions and then save that one for last, because there will be discussion on that?
You mean tonight?
Yeah.
Can I just add, sometimes there's a definition, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's allowed or permitted use. Can we maybe just, so nobody gets in an uproar about any, they're not all permitted use, it's all these definitions, not all permitted.
Correct.
There's some that are conditional, there's some that are.
You kind of broke it down.
Right, yeah, I have to find my own memo.
Michael, you got
It's
this?
just a definition, and then later on, the ordinance highlights, okay. Yeah. Well,
Right. Oh, I found it.
so maybe, Julia, you could flag that as we go through the definition. Just to remind you, this one is a conditional, or this is a permitted, or this is only allowed in M1, or.
Yeah, we can do that. We'll be moving a little bit. Give me a second to get my paperwork in order, and, all right.
We won't hear this only allowed in M1.
Okay. So the first added definition is adventure lodging. It says similar to a bed and breakfast, but instead of a dwelling, the lodging is provided by tents, whether on platforms or not, rough-fixed logs, cabins, and similar experimental lodging facilities, and where shower and bathroom facilities are provided. This is added in the proposed ordinance, and let me find it in whether or not it's permitted or conditional use.
That's conditional.
Thank you. Okay, that would be conditional use, which if we're discussing having residential as a conditional, would make sense to say conditional. Does anybody, board, commission, or public have an issue with that definition? Okay, seeing none. The next added definition is artisanal. Crafts that are made regionally and that are acquired for sale from craft makers or their representatives, but are not wholesale or jobber goods.
Or what?
Great word.
What does it say?
Wholesale or job or good.
Sorry, for anybody who needs to know, this is the proposed 2021 ordinance. I am bouncing between pages 16 and 7.
Why are we going through all these rather than just going through these?
She's going in alphabetical order.
Yeah, I'm just bouncing in alphabetical order to keep it easier for myself. Does anybody have an issue with that definition? Okay. Bed and breakfast, we've already discussed
Oh, sorry.
that, what's up?
Maybe the lawyers, he says regional, that's hard, that one can mean anything. That means regionally, in regional Pennsylvania, does it mean regionally, northeastern United States, does it mean regionally as in North America? I don't know what the intention is, but if you're gonna put the word regional, then I want to know it.
Let's define it for ourselves. I would say maybe it's Pennsylvania would.
You can say, in the state of Pennsylvania, and then it's clear.
Yeah.
I think the objective was a local person that's doing carving.
Yeah,
To sell their stuff.
that's what we're talking
And then just
about.
make it
Right.
Pennsylvania, make it.
Well, we are within 50 miles of the New Jersey border. Should we consider, I don't wanna say maybe a radius, but I don't wanna.
I think we should stick to number one, at least Monroe County, or Pennsylvania, Monroe County, Smithfield Township. I don't know about Warren and Sussex counties, and I don't think we want to be going to meetings over there to.
They're only
Well, let me ask this, because we're all talking about this, thing, but what is the actual, maybe this is a broader question, but what is the actual importance of defining artisanal? Because obviously there is no artisanal bread and breakfast. Is this to define the goods that are sold at a particular place? Because we have no right to regulate interstate commerce. That is Congress.
You do make a point there.
That's why
Ron,
you say local.
Ron, do you have any idea?
I don't even know why they.
Well, it's in here, from my understanding, because there was nowhere where you could sell these items. There was no definition of these items, there was nowhere you could sell these items, so the thought was to do a definition that has, these items and allow them in zone. Now, whether or not that makes sense or not, I'm just, writing what I believe I am told to write.
Could we then, perhaps bypass this and just say crafts that are made and are required for sale?
What's a craft?
That would-
We're gonna define crafts now, and,
Okay, so we're having issues with this one. In the sake of time and for all of the wonderful people sitting here, I'm gonna start this and we'll come back to this at some point, if that's okay?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, bed and breakfast, we've already discussed this. Are there any other concerns, board, commissioners, public?
yeah, I'm not going to go through them right now. I kind of expressed myself earlier, and I'd just like to see it buttoned up a little bit better.
Okay, start bed and breakfast. Next one is concentrated commercial malls,
What is that?
What the hell is that?
which is defined as a one or two-story building or a group of buildings containing a collection of several adjacent retail stores, service establishments, or offices located on only one or two parcels of land and are sometimes referred to as strip malls, and where long expanses of blank wall shall be avoided through the use of wall articulation. Breaking the continuous plane of the wall can be accomplished by recessing vertical segments of the wall at several intervals, or a course of brick or similar masonry material can be applied to the exterior walls at certain junctures in the wall. And changes in the material colors are also encouraged to break up the wall surfaces.
So,
Okay,
a better looking strip mall.
Yes, the only change in here is not permitting a concentrated strip mall. That was already permitted. It just defines that they have to, bifurcate the different sides of things. That has to look nice. Yeah.
It doesn't say that. It says, all it says is that
It's under the conditional, like that, whatever.
Thank you.
shall be avoided through the use of wall articulation. Boom, it stops. Everything from there on, it says can be accomplished. It doesn't say shall. There's a big difference in those two words.
I'm sorry, it's under permitted use.
No, okay, thank you.
So if you want different colors.
Those are examples today, that,
Yes, so it can be strengthened.
Yeah,
Another
I
star.
think shall's a good word.
Yeah, just change it to shall.
Okay. Next definition is farmer's market. A collection of small quantity regional farm products generally covered under the PA's back of the truck law, as well as prepared gourmet foods and artisanal crafts that are recognized as regional and unique. I think we found our problem there with the other definition.
we're back to crafts and the definition. What, did you say back of a truck,
It's back of the truck law.
It's a quoted,
Yeah.
That's a Pennsylvania law covering small quantities of agricultural products.
Both indoor, outdoor, are permitted uses,
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, next we've got the definition of a firearm. Shall include any gun, including a semi-automatic, automatic, or bump stock, shotgun, rifle, handgun, pistol, pellet gun, BB gun, spring gun, crossbow, bow and arrow, slingshot, or any other,
Paintball, put paintball in.
Is there,
For God's sake.
or any other device, including a paintball gun, that propels an object through the air, through the use of force, and is capable of creating any type of injury, destruction, or damage, however slight. Any issues with that definition?
You were aware of that. Sounds good.
Ron wrote it.
Yeah. Maybe that's why I asked him.
Okay, hearing none, we're gonna jump shoot indoor shooting range briefly, and we'll come back to it, I
How do
promise.
you know, Ron?
The next added definition, is considered
I know he did.
manufacturing, mechanical or chemical transformation of materials or substances into new products, including the assembling of components, parts, the manufacturing of products, and the blending of materials such as lubricating oils, plastics, resins, or liqueurs.
That's light manufacturing.
What page is that again, Julia?
Manufacturing.
It says
Oh.
light there.
Oh,
I'm sorry, the one above it.
Yeah, one up.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, hearing
Except
none.
I always learned that you don't use the same word in the definition. So you got manufacturing in the definition, so maybe.
no, that's under light manufacturing.
Making, or, use some other word.
Fabricating.
To be included.
Producing.
Putting together.
Producing a product, that's great.
Hearing no other comment, manufacturing light. Any manufacturing use with no or low environmental impact carried on in a completely enclosed building such as, but not limited to, commercial kitchens, the production and or assembly of photographic equipment, precision instruments, ceramic products, electrical or electric equipment, components and accessories, electric or mechanical measuring instruments and control devices, optical equipment, communication equipment, computers, instruments, accessories, and supplies used in medical diagnosis or treatment. Light manufacturing shall not include what are commonly known as CAFOs, i.e. concentrated animal feed operations, such as chicken farms, turkey farms, and pig farms, and similar animal farms and feeding operations.
I like that.
Yeah, that's good.
Cool, moving on. There was a change to the mixed-use building definition. I'll indicate where it changes. So this says, a building designed to encourage a diversity of compatible land uses, which include a mixture of two or more of the following uses: residential housing or dwellings, institutional, civic, office, commercial, or retail use, period. What is added now in the proposed definition states further, and where long expanses of blank wall shall be avoided through the use of wall articulation. Breaking the continuous plane can be accomplished, and this is rehashing what we did earlier. A note for everybody, while this language was added to the mixed-use building definition, it does copy language that's already in the ordinance, section 306.3.2. Just be aware. I know we have started this one already to say that we need to discuss the percentages. As the Board and Commission has discussed, are there any other questions about the mixed-use building definition and concerns? Okay, seeing none. Moving on, outdoor specialty market. An outdoor retail market dedicated to a single or group of specialty items such as genuine antiques, flowers, artisanal flower vases and arrangements, artisanal soaps and soap gift assortments, artisanal throw carpets, and wall hangings and similar products. Now we know why we have that word in there.
You could also just call it Chris Kindle Mart.
Is it a flea market?
No,
It's an outdoor market.
yeah, we have a definition for it, which is prohibited. Oh, it's indoor.
Artisanal flea market.
So,
Not a jury,
I don't know what to tell you. Either somebody can sell their own handmade candles or they can't. That's not what I consider a flea market. A flea market, as we said, is a junk, yeah.
Okay.
Either bought from wholesalers, jobbers, whatever, and put on.
Okay. And flea market is defined in the ordinance.
Okay. Moving on, seeing no comments, the scenic corridor, Chairman, you suggested that we're shifting that one off for a later discussion.
Yeah.
So I'm going to skip that one. Small wireless communications facilities, I'm also going to skip this one, because this one we have to add based on federal regulations related to wireless communications facilities, so we have no choice on that one. Transient retail business, notwithstanding the definitions of this use in the Township Code of Ordinances, Chapter 13, Part 2, transient retail business, for purposes of this ordinance, these businesses are characterized as pop-up stores, such as Christmas trees and flower tents, holiday ornaments, seasonal clothing and wares, and food trucks. Neither toilet facilities nor off-street parking are required beyond a best estimate of expected customer usage, in which facilities or parking will not block or otherwise obstruct adjacent rights of ways, alleys, roads, or streets. These businesses can operate for no longer than 30 consecutive days, with a 30-day period in between with no operation. In other words, these businesses may operate within the township for no more than 6 months out of the year.
Where is this allowed, or not allowed?
Stand by.
In the ED
In
zone.
the ED zone,
Is it permitted, or is it just?
I'm not sure. What is
Permitted? Okay.
If you look at the bottom of
that,
page
that
eight,
could be a can of worms.
page 8, bottom left-hand.
Can of worms is right.
Dave?
My concern with allowing that is competing with the bricks and mortar that are trying to sell, let's say it's flowers, it's Easter flowers, and you've got somebody that goes up there, pops up a circus tent, and throws a bunch of flowers out and sells them for less money than what the flower store's selling for, and then it takes away all of their revenue.
Well, it has to be on private property, so they have to rent the property from somebody, in a sense, making their own, competition.
So for
to the flower
example,
store.
so to David's point, for example, someone can't come in and say, I would like to sell Christmas trees at Waterfront Park, like that would not be something that's permitted.
Or along the road, unless it's on private property.
So they
What about in my office, if I wanted to pitch a tent in the parking lot on Easter and sell flowers for the weekend? And I'm taking away business from, or even Christmas trees. Now I'm taking away business from Regina and Richard Street Farm.
You could do it for 30 days.
I'm just saying, I don't think it's fair to the businesses that we're trying to, support in the township. I don't think it's fair to them.
At some point it has to be.
I would argue on the other side that, it may not be fair to somebody who wants to start a business and can't do it because we're protecting businesses that are there.
Okay.
That doesn't follow. I disagree with that. That reasoning, Robert.
What is your reason? What did you say? That we shouldn't do it at all, we shouldn't allow anything that's in competition with somebody in the town?
If you've got a vacant lot and then
Not at all.
pitch a tent for 30 days, your taxes are lower, you're not paying sanitary, there's a lot of overhead that you're not paying because you've only got a tent, and you don't have parking, there's just so many things that you're not paying for, yet you're still collecting all the profits at the sweet spots that the retail normally makes their money.
So what you wanna say is,
For
you
180
can't have a
days.
business unless you have a permanent, place of that business that you're paying for, is that what you're
I'm
saying?
just saying we should think about it.
Well, it seems like that's what you're saying.
No, it's
Just
not.
say it.
Robert, here's the deal. You're talking about a half a year.
I'm not defending it, I'm
That's
saying,
a
one
half
way or
a
another.
year. You're talking about a business it can be in business for half a year.
Well, then change
That's
it.
too long. Well, that's right. We gotta look at it.
These are all up here for,
That's why I'm bringing the point up.
That's right.
I mean, like a Christmas
We
market.
need to look at it.
Right.
Make it 30 days, period.
Let me just cite one quick
Oh,
example.
the Easter.
Spruce blight, okay? In comes a load of spruce trees to Richards or the guy up the street from Richards, okay? You can probably, I don't know if it's true, but I would almost bet you that you could track spruce blight and those mites that are destroying spruce trees,
Right.
township and county-wide, to that, to the
So you're saying
import.
Richards can't sell?
No,
trees?
I'm
I don't
saying
understand
you
your
can
point.
probably trace that. I'm just saying that you're, like, as Brian said, you're opening a can of worms, you're opening a can of bugs. Bring flowers in, there's, who knows what kind of bugs they bring with them, and infest people's flower gardens. I'm just saying that that's the kind of
If you feel that way, let's strike it. Don't have
Strike
it.
the whole thing, I wouldn't have
Fine.
any pop-up.
I don't have any reason to defend it or not.
Food trucks are nice, but it's got restaurants, so.
And where?
Yeah, but I will add that even if we don't address this now, Ron, correct me if I'm wrong, the municipality's planning code says that every use must be permitted in a township. I mean, there are certain uses that are not. So I don't want someone walking in with a curative amendment saying, I would like to build, or I would like to have, food trucks everywhere.
That could be absurd,
Fighting, okay?
Yeah.
You got the state house, the General Assembly passing this PPC, and you're supposed to have everything that's in it in your township? I don't think so. I'm sorry, but I've been against that from the start.
Well, yeah.
We've been through that.
And it's endless.
Right,
Just when you
it's
think you've covered everything, Jacob, here comes Brian Barrett with this crazy, Roberts, right? With some crazy idea to do something that's this.
I understand that. I'm just
Common sense.
saying it's something that we should think about, because the municipality's planning code does not once say the word, or the term common sense. We have to contend with things like that. I mean, obviously, I don't want us
Your
to
job, man's coming.
They were gonna have a pole dance joint or some strip joint up in the middle, right? And there was a hue and cry that went up, and did they ever put it up? I don't think so.
It has to be permitted, adult uses are somewhere, I think, they usually put them in the industrial
Yeah,
zone.
they have to be permitted somewhere, right?
Now they're in the entire ED zone.
Yeah.
Where does it say that you can
So
have
where's Middle Smithfield
adult
when you need
entertainment
it?
in the ED zone? Where, can someone tell me?
It's not defined anywhere, and
No, I think it's actually, that's not defined.
That's, you gotta go to your lawyer.
Okay, sorry.
No, that's.
I didn't wanna, start, I just wanted to explain that it, if we don't solve it now, we do have to solve it at some point.
Okay, so pop-up stores, no. Okay.
So you don't, no food trucks, no pop-up stores.
I don't want. Too much can happen, too many weird ways.
What about, let me ask this, if there's an event like Toby Hanna used to have, or still has Fall Fest or Community Fest, at those types of events, are there ever food trucks or food vendors? Right.
Well, the township can enact a temporary permit or a
Right.
Special use.
Those yellow
That's right. Right. I mean, we have them now, so I just wanted to,
So we can still continue with that.
I just wanted to point that out.
Get it out.
Okay, understanding that is up for discussion, there is another wireless communications facilities, definition, which we're skipping again because of federal requirements. The commercial indoor recreation and entertainment definition was revised only to exclude indoor shooting ranges, which states now facilities intended for banquets, conventions, public events, performances, indoor leisure time activities included but not limited to bowling alleys, indoor skating rinks, indoor swimming pools and facilities, but excluding indoor shooting ranges because they're their own definition. Any issues? Seeing none, the ordinance does say that we are repealing and restating home occupation and rehabilitation facilities as well. But neither of those are actually being changed, so I'm going to sidestep those. Last but not least, indoor shooting range. It says where the discharge of firearms occurs. This was an added definition, and it is conditional use in the economic development zone. And I understand that we have a lot of questions about that.
Don't we have a definition of it?
Oh, yeah, it's where the discharging of firearms occurs. That's it.
Make them all like that.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Ron, shouldn't we develop some language?
Probably allowed.
Yeah, that's my intent.
I think we developed a long definition.
We developed language within the definition or within the use of the indoor shooting range as opposed to just saying what is shooting.
Right.
But I think that's relevant to maybe some of the questions that are gonna come up.
I am sure, because there's a lot of law with respect to this.
Right. Well, that having been said, and everyone on both boards having expressed a number of opinions, I would like to entertain public comment. Generally, we ask that you don't take more than 3 minutes. Public comment is not considered to be response required, so while we may hear it, we may not entertain each one, but it goes on the record. Our office manager, Julia, will take a summary, essentially, of what you say. It will not be a transcription, but your sentiments will be reflected in the minutes of this proceeding. Before you start, please say your name and where you live in the township. Who would like to go first?
I think we're looking over there for somebody who'd like to,
Nina Guala. Nina, could you spell your last name for me? A-L-L-O-C-A. Thank you.
Excuse me, ma'am, could you come to the podium so the people on Zoom are
Yeah, that would be ideal, if you could come up.
not heard back there?
Just make sure you talk nice and loud for us, then,
I totally will. I live on Linda Street, I am the last house on that block, and, there's been shooting going on there for a while. There's shooting that goes on everywhere, that's not my issue. People target practice, they shoot here and there. What has been going on, and I'm sure none of you up there have sat in my yard and listened to the extent of hours of shooting constantly, and the echoes that come off of the mountain. My dog is afraid. I'm sick. I can't even sit out in my backyard and enjoy my peace and quiet, which that's why I bought my home, is to enjoy my peace and quiet. To be honest with you, I don't care what they do up there. I just don't want to hear it. I just want my peace and quiet. That is what I have experienced in Smithfield Township for the last 12 years, as peace and quiet. Bad enough they came in and took the woods away. Nothing we could do about that. But to have this constant shooting, hours, not 15 minutes, not here and there, is hours. And the type of weaponry that is being used, that is my problem. So I want to know how that's going to be addressed to maintain the serenity and the peace and quiet that the residents in that area have experienced for years. How is the township going to address that?
Thank you. Next up?
Actually, can I interrupt? Nina, are you referring to I believe it's called the Cold property? Is that what you're referencing, or?
Yes, I don't know who the person is, I've never met him, no one has ever came to me or sent me a letter of any intent of what it was going to be used for, or tried to sit down and discuss anything with me.
Okay.
So I'm assuming that's where it is, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Ron, didn't we go through a whole definition of what would be necessary for the conditional use about noise? I remember we went through all of this and we wrote something up that was quite extensive. Because the issue is noise. That's.
Well, the service, don't you call the police? I don't know.
They've been called.
I have called the police.
Oh, yeah.
The police, the state police tell me there's nothing they can do except permit. That's up to the township to enforce the peace and quiet in the area.
But we're talking about
I
this.
just want to stress again, you know, whatever you're gonna do up there, that's your business. But when it starts infringing on my peace and quiet and my right as a taxpayer to live and, you know, flourish in my acreage back there with the wildlife and everything that goes on. I mean, the airplanes right there, they skydive over my property. They're not infringing on my rights. They're not infringing on my peace and quiet. They're not infringing on any of that. okay? But when that happens, that's where I have to draw the line.
You know,
Because to me, it's just inconsiderate. It's inconsiderate.
what we're talking about this in the context of is, being able to allow indoor shooting ranges. And what I'm trying to get from Ron, which we went through, was a very long definition of saying that an indoor shooting range, could be approved if, it could be, the residents, like you, could be satisfied that the noise level was acceptable from that range. And I've done some research, not a lot, I admit, on baffling, berms, all kinds of things. There are ways to do it, but it has to be done, I think, to the satisfaction of nearby residents so that the noise level is either non-existent or acceptable. That's my feeling.
Is this outdoors or indoors?
Right now, it's going on outdoors.
Yeah.
Outdoors.
Is that allowed?
It's the terrain of the environment that it echoes through the mountains. Now,
I don't think in the way it's happening.
United States,
You know, any type of that is going to
You could
cause
come out
echoes
of-
through the mountains.
Worthington.
And it's been pointed out to us, we need to
Ron's doing a lot of
refine our definitions of shooting within the township.
Well, you
But-
talk about economic development and wanting to put residential areas. You know what? If somebody came when that shooting was going on, I could not sell my property. Nobody wants to sit and listen to that. Dogs in the neighborhood, children playing in those woods. I work in an arsenal. I work at Picatinny Arsenal, okay? I know all about it. There was a lawsuit, and I don't know if anyone is aware of it, years ago, where a piece of shrapnel traveled a mile, landed on a residential home, burnt a hole in the roof, and killed the cat on the child's bed. And they were all sure that they were gonna sue the government and get all kinds of money for that, okay? There's certain precautions that you have to take, that's all I'm saying. And I don't wanna hear it. I have family coming over, like I said, I'm sick. You know, people are coming to visit me. I can't even sit out and enjoy my days.
Understood. Okay, let's try to keep it to,
It's not public, I just wanted to ask Brian a question. Seems to me you and I discussed a number of years ago, discharge of firearms. And I thought there was an ordinance, Ron, in this town that prevents.
We do.
Discharge of firearms.
There is an ordinance, but
Doesn't
you
hold.
have to understand that this law has been challenged and challenged successfully. Stroud Township had a discharge ordinance that has just been overturned by the Commonwealth Court. And a decision in May of this year, Commonwealth versus Barris, Barris. Now, the Commonwealth Court did not close the door that you can't regulate discharge of firearms, but if you regulate it, you have to meet certain requirements. I've not yet done enough work on the discharge ordinance that is here to determine whether or not that would pass muster. My initial inclination, based upon what I read in the Commonwealth versus Barris case, would be it probably would not be. And the Commonwealth Court said that Second Amendment, which allows you to bear arms, is such that you have a right to practice shooting your gun so you can effectively bear arms. So with that rationale, that's a difficult rationale to overcome, where the court says, we will allow you to practice shooting your gun, because if you can't practice shooting your gun and you can't be efficient in using it, your right to bear arms is ineffective.
But what about,
That's difficult stuff.
Where is it lawful to shoot them arms? They got plenty of shooting ranges, go and you shoot your guns.
You have to talk to the Commonwealth Court, sir. I can't tell you that.
What you're
Sounds
saying,
like Afghanistan.
my name is Vito Sanfilippo, and I'm her neighbor.
Can you
I'm
spell your name, sir?
excuse me,
I'm sorry, can you spell your name for me?
VITO SANFILIPPO.
Thank you, got it.
Okay, I've been up here 28 years. Never heard, besides hunting or whatever, I don't mind. You wanna do a little target shooting, I don't mind. You wanna go hunting, you go hunting all you want, shoot all you want. But when you guys turn around and hear hours, all soft weapons going on, and I said to the township, to Brian, if the recordings that this is going on, and he said, this is ridiculous.
Let me say because of that, I was over there on a weekend, and I did hear, but I had to be careful, it's private property, and I had to be careful where I had to go to hear it, but yes, I did. And the state police have been there.
Yeah, and they said, call the township and tell the township about it.
Well, I can't say that's sure. Let me say.
He could turn around and do all the shooting he wants, I ain't got nothing against the guy, it's his property.
Yeah.
Try to muffle it down, put it into a thing, I don't have a problem. He could shoot a cannon in there. And when I got my grandkids coming out and telling me they're afraid to go out there shooting, and we take care of 5 to 7 grandkids at a time.
Well, let me say, again.
Finish up and I'm done. One afternoon, I'm hearing shooting, I look in the backyard, and I got 3 bears running across my property. What would happen if my grandkids were out in the yard? Yeah, that could happen exactly, and most of the time, they've gone into my garbage and everything else, but never in the afternoon. The shooting is going on, here's the mother and the 2 cops come flying across my property.
So know this, that this board and our solicitors, our engineers, we are really looking at this. I think it was said perfectly by our solicitor, Ron, it's a tough nut. And the people that passed this, I personally am a hunter. I own guns, and I believe that in the right hands and with the right use, as you said. But the effort that we're putting into this right now will be, I don't know where we'll be, but our solicitor right now working with us is working to try to alleviate this problem.
Like I said, I don't have anything against the gentleman, I don't even know. First of all, if he would've came to each neighbor and turned around and asked us, listen, I bought the property, I want to do a shooting range, this and that, how do you guys feel about it?
Right.
Get our opinion and whatever.
Yeah.
We didn't get none of that.
Yeah.
All we got was one weekend, pop, 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 pop.
That's right.
Kids running all over the place, they're shooting us.
Yeah. Let me just come in here and just start shooting my guns, because that's what I'm allowed to do.
Put covering it up or something, and if something indoor, I got a problem.
Never contacted any of the residents.
Understood. Thank you.
I mean, my husband, I'm sorry, Martha,
can you spell that for me, please?
C-J-O-S, C-H-I-N-E, Martha, D-A-R-C-O-L-O-C-T-A. My husband's a hunter. He goes shooting ranges. We're all into that. We understand that. We like that. But when you take away my peace and quiet, and we have to hear, not an occasional boom, shooting, which is going around, I mean, we're fine. We're okay with that. But to hear that, and you can it's not fair. I'd like to see any one of you up there. It's being able to enjoy your family in your backyard and hearing craziness like that. I mean, it's not right. I mean, we moved up to Pennsylvania, like she has said that, for exactly the peace and quiet. I could have stayed in New York and heard gunshots over there. I don't want that. I want my peace and quiet, my tranquility, my happiness. And this is being taken away from that. We understand it's a business, you like to do these rentals. My husband goes shooting. Still something like that there. We're fine with that. That would be awesome. But not to have it outdoor and do that to us. It's not fair.
Understood. Michael, you have a comment?
Suggest, sounds like the tricky issue as it relates to creating ordinance, sounds like it's a sound issue, so maybe that's the loophole, Ron, that you can.
It's the safety and sound.
Well,
I'm just saying.
I wanted to say safety.
Okay, so safety, sound, pursue that. It sounds like the supervisors are trying to find a way to mitigate that in residential zone.
Right. But before I go to Mr. Oaks, I know you would raise your hand. I just want to say, I appreciate everyone's sentiments. Please don't think that the rest of us, on the board don't care, because we absolutely, we're all, either of us are in the hunter's tradition, or our family are, or we're military and are not afraid of target shooting. We believe in those things, but we have to navigate a constitutional balance that all 3 of us went on the record saying we don't agree with. If it was up to us, we would stay with the existing ordinance. certain people have threatened a lawsuit over that, but, we're trying to balance the threat of a personal lawsuit from a gentleman and also, meeting the constitutional burden. And I think we can reconcile that through our capable solicitors' hands. That said, I'll go to the next,
Could I just say,
Well said.
my name is Kirsten Jones, Kirsten, Jones, and I live in Birch Acres. I'm on Randall Street, and my issue is, yes, the right to bear arms, but what about the safety of those bullets, that if you're out there shooting, well, how, bullets, if you miss the target, where's the safety for, what's going on? For any accidental bullets? Who's monitoring that, and what are the rules for that?
thank you.
Because from what I understand, bullets travel very far, and our neighborhood's right there. I like to walk, I like to go in the woods. It is scary.
Thank you. Mr. Rhodes?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, early on when Mr. Cole bought the property,
Hey, hold on a sec, back up.
Tom Road, I lived on the street, right next to Vito, pretty much in my backyard as well. Yes, the noises, it's still a little overbearing, but I myself like to shoot, and I shoot probably I was shooting there before, it was probably not supposed to be done. But as far as safety goes, I talked to Ryan, when he bought the property, he had come to my house, I had talked to Vito, and I did say that we would meet with him, we could come down. He never came back to me. I'm not arguing, we're neighbors, whatever, we're not gonna have a.
No, of course not.
But I did reach out, I have been able to talk to Ryan, when we do have, he was shooting something, I thought the mountain was coming down one day, I called. The answer is stop. There's a lot of ways around things, you can just, a lot of it is one-on-one with the owner. I think it needs to be permissible somewhere in the township, we need to have a place to go, because we can't just shoot anywhere. The noise, yeah, my dogs hate it, I hate fireworks, I hate parachuters dropping in my yard, or near the yard. I mean, there's a lot of other things we gotta address too. But to stay on topic here, I don't feel unsafe. I've seen what he built. He doesn't know it, but I've kind of snuck around. I've been up there. It doesn't really bother me that much. I'm a very approachable person from my point of view. So a lot of times maybe we just talked to him sooner and said, what are your plans? Or, Brian, maybe you could have came down to my house again, I'd have drugged them all over, and we could have had it. But it's not a big deal to me to have it in my backyard when I wanted to shoot too. Do I feel unsafe? No. Do I like the noise? No.
We really
Come
don't
to a
feel
compromise
safe as far as that goes, it's just the noise.
Right. Right.
We don't mind the shoot.
She was worried about the safety, but that is in my backyard. And
We don't mind the shoot.
right, but it's not in your window. Not in your window. It's my
Understood,
window.
okay, all right. Let's have one at a time, please.
It's very hard for me to keep those out, people are talking.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
I can call you tomorrow, we'll do it again.
Yeah, that'll be fair. How's this?
My name is Michael Sack. How are you, sir? Good. Did you say what the hell is this? Is that what-
No, I did.
You did, right? That was fun. I'm a small business owner here,
How do you spell your last name?
SAK. I just want to give you my background. Prior military, veteran.
Me too.
Thank you for your service.
What the hell was that? So, I'm a certified NRA, range development officer. I'm certified in all the disciplines in the NRA, teaching, et cetera. I've been teaching with my partner for the past 7 years here in Pennsylvania. I tell each and every one of my people that come to the class what's attached to every bullet. A lawyer is attached to every bullet. What we developed at Brian's Range is completely in accordance with the NRA. There are berms, backstops, everything is in accordance with their safety standards. Brian's actually gone above and beyond to increase the berm in the back and to decrease the noise. We've done some preliminary noise testing.
Please don't interrupt him.
We've done some preliminary noise testing. We have to do some further calibrations, but we've been shooting suppressed on the property. When you shoot suppressed on the property, at the level that we're at, it's 90 decibels. At somebody's property, off, I don't know, a quarter mile away, it is considerably less. I can't.
Ma'am, we have to let him speak.
I can't attest for what happens when I am not at the property. I can attest for what we do there. I've been training there for the past 9 months. We've trained women, we've trained children right here today
At that property, sir?
at that property.
That's news to us.
We've done it,
I,
and it's pretty amazing.
that's something.
And it's pretty amazing. We're giving back to the community. We want to help the community be safe. We want them to use firearms safe. What is the number one cause of firearm accidents? Carelessness and ignorance. That's what we're trying to do. And we have mothers right here that took it upon themselves to bring these children to us to help them learn that. And we've been doing that for them. And it's all in accordance with the NRA. That's all I wanted to say.
And the conditional use under discussion here is for an indoor range.
Correct, sir.
And we've purposely, or I have kept that definition, rather loose because, what is it? It's 4 walls and a ceiling. It doesn't say much more than that. Is there any reason that what you're doing couldn't be done within an indoor range?
The issue is, right, when it comes to you defining an indoor range, there are environmental standards, there are purifiers. It really depends upon what your definition of it is.
Actually, DEP gets involved, don't they?
Yeah, it really depends, right?
Yeah.
And then how far do you go with that, right?
Well,
There's no reason why you cannot shoot in the state of Pennsylvania on a property like that and not violate the Second Amendment. Yes, I agree. We've come up with rules with Ryan where we said, we won't shoot on Sundays, right?
Well, remember,
What I'm trying to tell you
Invite you over to my house. I invite you to my house and listen to my,
Let's keep this civil, please.
I invite you to my house.
noise is the issue.
But the noise, and Joshua is going to speak after me, is not an issue when I am shooting at that property. I cannot attest for what happens when I'm not there, but I'm shooting suppressed. I have videos of shooting suppressed with the noise, and a sound meter. I have all of that. The issue is, we're doing it safely, people concerned about safely, there's no safety issues there. That's all I want to say. Thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Joshua Prince. I represent Mr. Cole, as I believe you already know. There's a number of issues that have been raised that I want to address. One was the issue of noise. If you actually look at 35 PS 4501, 4502, there's a range protection statute. It says if there is no noise ordinance in effect at the time the building begins of a range, it's forever judged as there being none. If there is a noise ordinance in effect at the time that construction begins, then it's forever judged by that noise ordinance. Now, I've scoured the ordinances here, and I haven't found a single noise ordinance with general application. So that means, as of right now, Mr. Cole is judged as there never being any noise ordinance, and that is into the future. But even given that, you just heard the steps they're taking to try and be neighborly, try and help mitigate the sound so that neighbors don't have any issues. And that's what Mr. Cole wants. Mr. Cole doesn't want everyone upset. No one wants that. That doesn't help anyone. But when all of a sudden municipalities start entering into the fray and regulating where they can't, it causes issues. We just last week had a new decision from the Circuit Court of Appeals in Drummond versus Robinson Township, striking down an ordinance that regulated gun ranges under their zoning map and found it unconstitutional under the Second Amendment. Also, I've litigated a number of preemption cases, including the fact that under 6120 in Lower Marion Township versus Firearm Owners Against Crime, discharge was found to be preempted. And what that means is in section 6120, it says that any form of local government cannot regulate discharge. But again, even knowing all that, and Mr. Kolb and I have had plenty of discussions about these issues, he still went out and tried to find ways to reduce sound levels, not just for his own use on his property, but for the neighbors. And he intends to continue to do that, to try to be neighborly. Maybe there would have been a way to address it sooner with some of the neighbors. Unfortunately, that's water over the dam. We can't change that. But we're here today, and we want to try to be open with the township. We want to try and resolve the matters and work with you instead of against you in finding a solution. But that solution isn't the township regulating ranges and discharge and firearms. That's preempted. And we also have, under Second Amendment litigation, case law stating that you can't do it there either. So with that, I just ask that we please keep an open dialogue and an understanding, and actually review case law I've provided. Prior, when I sent my letter, I was not aware that there was any issue with noise. No one had actually ever raised that with Mr. Cole prior. Oh, we were told it was a discharge issue. And so that's why I addressed discharge. But as I said when I began, there is a separate range protection statute that is not found in my letter. And that again is 35 PS 4501 and section 4502. So I appreciate your consideration.
Sir, can I just say one thing before you leave? Yeah, with all due respect, when you ask for an open dialogue, threatening to personally sue us each doesn't exactly foster that. I know it's a business tactic. This is what you do. You practice in this area of law. But we would have appreciated the same sort of neighborly outreach you're saying Mr. Cole did if you talked to us. That would have been nice.
Well, my client was threatened by your agent, the zoning officer, with prosecution over an unlawful and unconstitutional ordinance. So if we want to go through the procedural history, look who put the first shot across which bow first.
Sir, I'm not suggesting, that there isn't, preemption statutes. I understand that. We all read your letter, and a lot of us were aware of these types of statutes beforehand. But what I'll suggest to you is that the zoning officer, as you may know, if you would research the MPC or the, zoning code with the Pennsylvania zoning officer rules, you would know that the Board of Supervisors does not explicitly authorize, the action of the zoning officer. So I understand that, and
He's an agent of the township.
I understand that. Now, believe me, I ran for this job and got elected not knowing nothing. I'm just suggesting that if you want to have an open dialogue, reach out with a hand instead of, the threaten to let us know who we should send the service for the subpoena for. I'll let our solicitor do the rest of the talking unless my colleagues would like to add anything. But, of course, we want to have an amiable solution here that protects the township and our neighbors and preserves your client's right to conduct business. I don't think it's hard to reconcile all three of those interests.
And remember, we're talking here about approving indoor shooting. It doesn't mean anything about other things outside that, but it doesn't seem there's any reason not to approve at least an indoor range. It doesn't say anything else is prohibited.
I don't think anyone here understands the cost associated with doing an indoor range, especially when you're talking about rifle caliber. Just for the lead necessary filtration equipment, you're easily looking at around $500,000. And then you have the filters that you have are hazmat once they come out because they're encrusted with lead that you also have to contain and keep in certain locations. You have OSHA you have to deal with because of the lead. And then you also have the high-end levels of steel to be able to limit rifle caliber from going through. So you're easily talking millions of dollars to put an indoor range that is 100 yards long. And so that is part of the issue. If you're talking about a small, 25, 50-yard range, you can probably do it for about $750,000, but you're not doing rifle calibers, you're probably limited to pistol calibers. And that's why the issue is outdoor ranges for my client.
Okay.
May I ask you this, sir, before you leave? Is this the property is owned by Mr. Cole?
Cole, yes. Milford Road. Milford Road.
Pardon me?
Milford Road.
Yeah.
Owned by Mr. Cole.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, God, believe me, I've been there many times. It's not any part of the subdivision or anything else. It's solely another intricate and standalone property where this is going on.
It's his property. It's the property. I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, the question very simply is that the property was sold, part of it. And Mr. Cole does not own a good part of it now.
Motel part.
It's only the part that Mr. Cole owns. I'm not here representing anyone else who owns.
He just wants to clarify which part he owns.
Right.
Which tract he owns?
No, we know what he owns.
Okay.
I'm just saying that where this is going to happen or is happening now, is it, solely removed from the tract that, was sold?
Yes,
All right, so there's nothing that abuts it or none of that kind of stuff?
it would not be on the parcel.
Because all right, and again, that's another consideration, simply because of the occupants that are in these, facilities now.
Right.
You're aware of
And
that?
like we said, there's been no issue of escapement, and I believe Mark previously pointed out, everyone's always liable for their own actions. If a round leaves the property, which is called escapement, the person is responsible for that round and any harm it does.
The owner or the shooter?
It can, depending on the circumstances, be both potentially,
Okay.
but generally always the person who pulls the trigger at a minimum.
Yeah. Good.
If there's negligence involved of the owner for failing to properly oversight, there could be on the owner as well, not just the shooter.
So that's where we will be involved in trying to come to terms, with something that can be deemed safe, sound, and as noiseless as possible. Okay, thank you.
No, I just wanted,
is that the
business, or is it people, friends coming over
To the,
Well, as you heard Mark come up, he does have a business where he's training these young ladies out there.
No financial transactions between me and Ryan, he just allows me to use property.
What about his
Firearm
his
safety.
client? His client stay in,
No, not the client. Yeah, I mean,
or the people that come and shoot?
they're getting trained by Mike.
but what's the population?
And I'm covered under NRA, instructor's insurance, plus I have liability insurance that covers this as well.
Okay, is this a business of yours, I think, was the question.
I have a business to train people,
And,
but Ryan allows me to use his property free of charge to support the shooting sports.
well, no, we understand that fully, but are you, reimbursed or in any way?
I
Compensation?
don't understand where you're going with this, because my
Well,
question.
my question to you, is it a business?
I never once interrupted you, is it okay if I just talk?
And then go.
So, sir, I'm just trying to understand where you're going with this. I am paid to teach firearm safety to people, yeah,
By who?
by people.
Okay, so you have clients in here with you now? Okay, so it is a business on the property.
No, it's not on the property. When my name is Ali Guerrero.
Thank you.
I am a client of Raven Point Group. That has nothing to do with Mr. Cole. So I contacted, Mike to be trained. I'm a realtor, so I'm going into homes with people. I have my concealed carry, but I'm not comfortable carrying without knowing what I'm doing and being trained. So the next step after my concealed carry was to be trained. I heard great things about Raven Point, and so I called Mike and I went for a class with two other female realtors. It was it was a small class, and it was in another location for about 4 or 5 hours of hands-on instruction. From that point, we were brought to practice what we had learned, at the site. And, I can't speak for other clients. I can't speak for anybody else. But I will say that when I was there, we were firing suppressed firearms. And, while we had earmuffs on and he was insistent on being safe, with or without the earmuffs, there was basically no sound. And then when I, hired him to train my kids, because again, now I have firearms in the house, I wanted my children to have firsthand instruction on firearm safety. Both of them went over the summer and, they went on and they had a private class where they can, have one-on-one instruction and experience. And then because they insisted that as a parent, I needed to be at the range to supervise, the shooting part of it, they got to practice, what they had learned. And again, at that point, they were using suppressed firearms. So when we were there, when I've been there with Raven Point Group, it has been suppressed. It's usually on the shorter range, and then we did the suppressed rifle. Yeah, may I ask what time that you were, over there at the range, what day and time that was?
Yeah.
The only time we ever meet with them is on Saturday. On a Saturday, probably, and it's for an hour. It's for an hour. an hour.
Okay.
But again, it was about, I would say from like 1 to 2:30, it's 2:30, but the shooting is, it's not also, when we were being trained, it was not rapid fire, it was not, with automatic weapons, semi-automatic, firearms, and there was instruction in between. So while you're there for an hour and a half, it's not constant firearms, it was more, a lot of the instruction. The other thing I wouldn't,
Could you please, if you're gonna keep talking, please wrap it up in the next 30 seconds.
Yes, that's perfect. And the last thing I'd like to say is that I've been to other ranges, and this has been a peace of mind for me because of the safety practices that Mike and his colleagues put into practice when handling firearms. They know what they're doing, they show us what to do, and they take their safety on the range very serious. That's the only reason why I brought my kids.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone that has not made a comment that would, I'll get to you in a second, that has not spoke? Because at this point, I want to hear the final comments from those that haven't spoke, and then we haven't spoken yet. Thank you. Please proceed.
My name is Jerry Burns, T-E-R-Y-B-U-R-N-S. I'm a resident of Birch Acres. My property borders on the street. My concerns about all this are three. One is safety. I'm sure it's safe sometimes, but accidents happen. 9mm bullets at the right angle can go miles. Within 3/4 of a mile of this range, there are 2 daycares, there's an animal hospital, other things like that. So, and that's not just for Acres, that's on Route 2. The second concern I have is property value. Why would people want to buy a property? It's now become like this. My third concern is quality of life, which I think is aptly said by the lady here. So, those are my concerns, and I share them with people who spoke. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
We all, practice.
If you can do it quickly, because I know there's you and 2 others that want to wrap up quick, and then we're gonna.
They want to keep safety, that's fine. You have a gun, you shoot, target practice, that's awesome. Machine gun, what do we need target practice, to defend ourselves with a machine gun? This is what we hear.
Right.
I don't know if it is a machine gun or whatever it is, but that's constantly, that's not right. That's not fair. You want to do target practice, you want to do that, that's
If you would like a minute just to hear it, I have it recorded on the phone.
I don't think, if you want to send it, it's not.
It's only like 20 seconds.
No, I understand. I have heard it. Brian shared with us last summer.
Right, that was when they first started.
Right. And you could feel free to send it to us. With all due respect, we cannot regulate the type of weaponry. I forget your name, sir.
Vito Sanfilippo.
Right.
Now, as far as the young lady spoke over there, and she had said that it only happens occasionally on weekends, which it does. The last time, for the past month, it's been happening every weekend, Saturday and Sunday. 9:30 was 2 weeks ago, from 9:30 to 1:30 in the afternoon. Sunday, it started about 11 o'clock and lasted until about 3 o'clock. We're not talking about target shooting for half an hour, even an hour.
Sure.
When you're talking about 3, 4, 5 hours, continue to shoot, it gets a little ridiculous.
Understood. Mr. Rode, your last comment, sir?
Trying to be patient.
Understood. Appreciate it.
My only question is, I heard that, it sounds like that he may be under the permissible use, may be under the radar right now, because it's already there, wasn't permitted before it was there. What happens when he sells? Is that changed? If he sells it to another guy who wants to come in here and operate a range, he gonna be under the new ordinance you may propose? Does that change? Or is it still under the radar and always stays the same?
I think that's a question that I think Ron or the zoning officer are better equipped to answer. It might take time. I don't think.
No, it doesn't take any time. If it's the same use that has been occurring before the ordinance goes into effect, it's a prior non-conforming use and it can continue. If the new owner changes the use in some fashion, then the ordinance can get.
All right. If you're gonna take like 15 seconds, because
I started this, and I'd like to conclude. I invite any one of you to come and sit on my property, including Mr. Cole, while this is going on, to hear what I hear, okay? And I also want to know if anyone would want that in their backyard. You tell me it's okay to have that in your backyard, and then I'll shut up. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate everyone coming here and getting active in their local government. It's an important thing that, not a lot of people are willing to do, and this is where the decisions are made. Not every decision, but a lot of things that are incredibly important, so I appreciate that. I think at this point, you know, our timeline on that's gonna be up to whatever the correspondence is between our solicitor and Mr. Cole's, representation. But in terms of the things we came to discuss today on zoning, we're going to aim for, I think by the end of the year, for a skinny ordinance to tackle the pertinent syntax errors and some that may be slightly more convoluted. And then we can get to the other larger items at a later point, because that's going to be an ongoing discussion. We have the regular Board of Supervisors meeting at 7 o'clock, so at this point, I'm going to...
Take it, don't we have to?
You're all welcome to stay, but you'd be crazy to do it.
Yeah, I think... Okay, well, with that, I move that we adjourn this joint session.
Guess what?
Hold on. Yeah, did you second?
Yeah.
All right, all in favor? Bruce, you can vote on that.
Aye.
Okay, adjourned.